Are you having trouble knowing where your shots went when you're shooting in live fire? If so, this video is for you. What's up, guys? My name is Rob Epifania. I am a USPSA Grandmaster and I'm the owner of Systematic Performance Concepts. In this video, we're going to talk all about shot calling. A lot of times when I am teaching a class and we go into a specific shot calling exercise, I ask this question first. How do you know where your shots are going? And I might hear a bunch of different answers, but a lot of times most of us may not understand exactly what we're using to indicate that we fired a good shot. In some of the worst cases, we're actually using our vision to look at the target to see the hits on the target. That's not a great way to do it, only because, for one, you're taking a long time to visually confirm that you've actually hit the target, and two, depending on the target, you may not even see those hits. So if we're talking from a personal protection standpoint or a self-defense encounter, that kind of thing, a lot of times you won't be able to see where these hits happen, especially if someone's wearing a dark shirt or something along the lines of that. So we need to understand where our shots are going so that we can have confidence that we have hit our intended target here. Now, let's get into it. There are three typical ways that I talk about calling shots. Calling shots just means, where did my shot go? I have a good awareness of where it went. Three ways in which we could do it. The first way is the fastest way. However, there are some issues that come along with that. So let's talk about it. The first way is going off the trigger break. So as soon as the shot has broken, as soon as we feel our finger kind of break through the wall and start to let the shot go, maybe even hit the end of travel at the back of the trigger travel, we can assume that our shot has gone wherever the dot or the sights were when that happened. Now, that is the fastest way because it is the earliest in the cycle of what we're trying to do. It also goes based off of feel of your finger. With that said, there are times where it can be a disadvantage as well. And largely it comes from the anticipation that the shot is going to happen. And let's say we're aiming on target and all of a sudden we think the shot's going to happen now and we move the gun a hair early. That can cause issues where we drag shots off of targets, so on and so forth. When would this be most useful? When the target gives us the most room for error in case that does happen. So I would typically recommend using the trigger break to call shots as a method on easier targets. So all three of these are just tools. You can use them as you'd like for their advantages and understand where their disadvantages are. Trigger break, that is the disadvantage in the sense that you can commit to leaving a target early and you drag a shot off target. That means targets that are a bit more forgiving are the ones to use this on because of its speed advantage. That's number one. Number two, we can go off of the opposite of trigger break, which is trigger lift. So as soon as we break the trigger and we start moving off the trigger to get prepared for the next shot, the gun cycles at this point. We can assume that when our finger is moving up off the trigger lift, that at that point, 100%, the shot has gone off. Okay, so the shot has gone off. You're already in the recoil cycle. If you're resetting the trigger in recoil, that is what you should be doing. And that allows you to understand, hey, where my finger started to lift off, that's where my shot should be. And then you have approximately a 2 to 3 inch deviation depending on the target here. So that works well. Trigger lift works very well because the timing is very similar to the third method that we're going to talk about. And it works really well for dry fire. So when we're talking about live fire to dry fire doesn't have any recoil, doesn't have any movement of the gun aside from what the inputs that we're putting in. With that said, trigger lift is a great way to time it similarly to what we would do in live fire. So trigger lift is it's not the fastest, but it is very effective. And then the way that you would make up the speed here is the time difference would be by moving to the next shot sooner, whether it be in recoil, whether it be in transitions. So trigger break number 1, trigger lift number 2. Let's go on to the third one. The third one is actually dot lift or sight lift. And that goes from being from a physical, which is feeling the trigger either break or lift off, to a very visual reference. So let's take a look here. So what we have here, we have one of our standard competition targets. What we mean by dot or sight lift is the moment that we see, so whenever our sights are on target or our dots on target, there's a little bit of movement there. Whatever we see, as soon as the dot starts to lift, or the front sight in this particular case, starts to lift off the target. So what you might see is, let's say we're shooting for precision. You might see the tip of the pen here, sitting here, kind of floating around, all of a sudden starts to lift up as we press the shot off. We can assume that that's where that shot went, in this area right here. Why? When the sight starts to lift, when the dot starts to lift, that means the recoil cycle is already starting to happen. That means the bullet has already left the barrel. Now, this method in terms of timing is probably the slowest, but again, you can make up that time by getting to the next shot sooner. It's going to be the most positive one, in the sense that what you see, you're doing this visually, so your brain and vision is processing what is happening real time. So let's say another example here, right? So we assume we're here, right? We start to press the trigger and we see something like this, okay? So it went from here, down here, and up during the trigger press. So we can assume that that shot would probably be in this area on the target here, because during the trigger press, the dot went from here, moved down, and then went up. So this is the most positive way to identify, in my opinion. I'm not the only one who does this. I'm not the only one who does this. There are other people who could do trigger lift and trigger break really well as well. I found this to be the most positive for me. So again, going through the 3 methods: trigger break, trigger lift, dot lift. Trigger break's the fastest, but you can commit to it early. Easy targets. Trigger lift, great for dry fire. Because there's no recoil, we can now use that lift point to be about the same as it would be in live fire. Dot lift or sight lift, that's going to be the most positive visually. So you're going to be able to see that with your eyes and be able to make probably the most accurate reference there when it comes to visual information. And it is mainly for live fire. Oh, another thing, something to plug. So Ace VR is a virtual reality training system. It can bridge a little bit of that gap for shot calling when it comes to dot lift, because you actually have recoil in the game. You don't have actual recoil in the gun that you're using, but you do have recoil in the game, which allows you to kind of play around with these concepts. So guys, if you have any questions, please put them below. If you like this video, please share it with others.